The first domino of not just Phoenix Suns free agency, but free agency, period, has finally fallen. Collin Gillespie coming back to the Phoenix Suns. Let's have some fun and talk about it. What's up, everybody? Welcome into a breaking news edition of the PHNX Suns show. I'll be joined, of course, by the usual cast of characters, Gil McGregor and Stephen Brejon-Garner, just a little bit once they wrap up Mercury coverage. But I am Eric Ruby coming to you live from my home studio as the Phoenix Suns have made the first move of free agency, according to reports from ESPN's Shams Charania. Free agent guard Collin Gillespie intends to sign a 4-year, $48 million deal to return to the Phoenix Suns. Of course, this is something we've been talking about for a while, but let's talk about the nitty-gritty. Let's talk about the fact that it's actually happened, and let's have some fun here on the weekend before the draft and a week and a half before free agency. But of course, first things first, if you're here live on YouTube for this breaking news edition, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, make sure you are a member of our YouTube channel, and make sure, of course, you are tuned into PHNX Suns. We are live 5 days a week during the offseason, including draft shows coming up on night 1 and night 2 this week. So stay tuned for that. And if you're listening on audio, 5-star reviews go a long, long, long way. Look, we've got a lot to get into today. Let's talk about Collin Gillespie going from being a two-way guard for the Phoenix Suns 2 seasons ago, being in and out of the league, and now being able to call himself a true established NBA player. We have to say congratulations to Collin first and foremost. We can get into the good, the bad, the positive, the negative, the numbers, the upside, the downside, the cap sheet. We're going to get into all of it in this edition of PHNX Suns. But we got to do something first. And we just have to acknowledge and, of course, congratulate Collin Gillespie. This is a success story, not just for the Phoenix Suns, and we'll talk about that in a little bit about how this should be a good deal for the Suns, at least in my opinion. We'll get Gil and Steven's opinion later. But this is an incredible story for Collin Gillespie, who was a champion in college, went undrafted, was a champion in the NBA for the Denver Nuggets when they went on their title run, found his way to Phoenix, where he expected to play his first year under Mike Budenholzer. Of course, not last season, but the season before that. But instead, the Suns then went on and signed Monte Morris, and they signed Tyus Jones, and you got Devin Booker and Bradley Beal, and got to the point where Collin Gillespie on a 2-way deal was averaging a triple-double on the Valley Suns and getting spot minutes up on the regular NBA Suns. Now, as the season went on, of course, Collin played a little bit more. We all remember that game against the Clippers where he almost single-handedly powered them to a victory with his hustle and his grit and his determination, and earned a full-time contract for the first time in his career going into this past season. So already a win for the Phoenix Suns organization. You take a player that another franchise gave up on in the Denver Nuggets, you sign him on a 2-way deal. He plays good enough his first year on a 2-way deal to then go and get converted to a full-time standard contract player going into this past season. Now, I think a lot of us, and I know a lot of you in the chat, like Psycho Blue, Abdimo, Russell, hello, everybody who's in here right now, we appreciate all of you, including Riddle with a $1.99 super chat who says, miss this chat. We miss you all the time, Riddle. Love it when you can catch it live. I think everybody expected Collin Gillespie to be good this year. If you watch Suns games, you're like, yeah, this guy's going to be a good backup point guard. He's going to be a good change of pace guy. He plays pretty good defense for his size. He rebounds like crazy for his size. And of course, we know he can shoot the hell out of the ball. But I don't think anybody, and I'll put myself in this, if you felt differently or you have the receipts that you guessed differently, I'd love to hear. I don't think anybody expected Collin Gillespie to do what Collin Gillespie did this past season. He set this Phoenix Suns single-season franchise record for three-pointers made in his first year on a standard contract. He set a career high in games played, points per game at 12.7 points per game, rebounds per game at 4.1, and assists per game at 4.6, all while also averaging over a steal per game as well. Now, it's not just the fact that he had the raw statistics. The Suns were really good with him on the court as well, and that shows by how many games he started. He played 80 games. He started 58 of them. He went from playing 461 minutes the season prior in Phoenix to over 2,200 this past year. That is a testament to your coaching staff. That is a testament to your analytics department. It's a testament to your development, but it's a huge, massive testament to Collin Gillespie. Collin Gillespie put in the work to get here. And now he finds himself, after having quite literally a historic season with the Phoenix Suns, that might have trailed off a little bit at the end, and we will talk about that. But he went from undrafted, two-way contract, to full-time player, to now somebody who just signed, according to Shams Charania, or intends to sign once the free agency period starts in about a week and 3 days, a 4-year, $48 million deal. Now, we don't know for sure exactly what the annual average value of that is going to be. It could be an ascending contract for the Phoenix Suns, which is usually how these things go. It could be a flat rate, or, of course, it could be a descending contract. Now, a flat rate would put you about $12 million per year, which is a fantastic price for Collin Gillespie. That's about backup point guard money, high-end six-man money. And I think it's something that when you look at the years and we take a look at the Suns salary cap here and you look forward, now obviously we have not put Collin Gillespie in this graphic yet, simply because we don't have the specific details on what exactly his contract is going to be. But when you look and you go forward into the next couple of seasons, there's only one player who signed for the Phoenix Suns for the next 4 years. That's Devin Booker. Right? And of course, that makes sense. Supermax player, supermax contract. He's under contract until the 2029-2030 season. That's 4 seasons from now. Dylan Brooks might be getting a contract extension, but who knows, right? This is now the first player that, according to the numbers, according to the years, will be on a team with Devin Booker throughout this supermax contract. And what you need to do in order to not only succeed with a player like Devin Booker eventually making close to $70 million per year, but also dealing with the dead cap of about $23 million for the next 4 seasons as well, is you need to get wins on the margins. And that is 1,000,000% what this is. A win on the margins. Now, some people might look at a guy who's only spent 1 year in the league and say, well, 4 years, $48 million, that sounds like a lot of money. Or you can have, like some people in the chat here, like Gmon, who says, dang, needed defense, better decision-making and size. Like, I get why people would maybe look at a roster constructed like this and think to themselves, well, is point guard really a top priority? I think the Suns have made it clear with who they're working out. And of course, now with prioritizing re-signing Collin Gillespie as their first domino of the offseason, that they do want another guard in this rotation. They need a guard in this rotation. They need a playmaker. Now, the argument with Collin Gillespie beyond, of course, well, he set the single-season franchise record for three-pointers made, which, of course, is a really, really big deal. Or he's a great success story, like the whole timeline that I just laid out for you here. It goes beyond that, and there is some nuance in this. And yes, there is some risk in this as well. If you look at Collin's regular season stats as opposed to his postseason stats, there is a rather significant drop-off in almost every single category. 12.7 points per game in the regular season to 8.2 points per game in the postseason. 4.2 assists per game in the regular season to 2.8 assists per game in the postseason. 4.1 rebounds per game in the regular season actually went up in the postseason to 4.3. He shot 45.5% from 2 in the regular season, actually went up to 53.8% from 2 in the postseason, but that 3-point percentage, that's what really dipped. Shot above 40%. That is even with a slight dip in that second part of the season there for Collin Gillespie. Still shot over 40% on ridiculously high volume to 37.9% in the postseason. So not terrible, but certainly a drop. And I think that when you look at Collin Gillespie, I think that there is a little bit of risk with taking somebody who has played 1 year in the NBA and had, again, objectively, an incredible year and giving him a 4-year deal. Now, do I think that this is an appropriate price for Collin Gillespie at 4 years? Yeah, I do. I do think so. However, the second part of the season, the post-All-Star break for Collin Gillespie, was not exactly something to write home about. Now, there are, of course, theories as he had cupping on his shoulder, if he was fully healthy. We don't even know if he was fully healthy. Kind of seemed like he was in a slump. Of course, another conversation that goes with Collin Gillespie is, did he just run into a wall? I mentioned the minutes played earlier, the 400 minutes played the season prior to over 2,200 this past season, to go from barely starting any games in your NBA career ever versus starting 50 games. Over 50 games this season for Collin Gillespie. Did he hit a wall? Well, that would be an understandable explanation. Now, there are a couple of ways that you can look at that. Maybe he did hit a wall. You would hope that then in his second full season, knowing that he's going to be on a full-time contract, knowing he's going to be a huge part of this team, whether he starts or not, and preferably in my case, I don't know if I'd like him to start for his own sake and for the Suns' sake. I think he is a perfect complementary piece off the bench, and I think that is what the price that they are reportedly going to pay him demands. But you look at a guy like that and say, okay, going into next season, get his conditioning up. He knows what to expect from it. Even though he's 26 years old, it was basically a rookie year for him with some prior, very brief experience on the pro level. Not the pro level, but the NBA level. The Valley Suns is still very much the pro level. And he's just going to get better. He's going to fight through it. He's going to be more consistent. So that is certainly something that you can look at and say, well, I'm not going to be worried about the latter half of his season, the latter part of his season, simply because he's going to get better. He's going to get more used to it. He's going to become a veteran of sorts, even though he'll still be very, very young in his NBA career. Now, that's what I believe. I believe that he's going to get better in that second part of the season. I'm sure there was something wrong with his shoulder. Getting that type of cupping consistently and then the steep drop-off that we saw in his shooting was certainly, I don't think, a coincidence when it came to Collin Gillespie's numbers. But there's the other argument. And the other argument is going into the season, and I think this is best highlighted by J.J. Redick and Austin Butler as Collin Gillespie torches the Lakers in the first month or two of the season, where Austin Butler turns and goes, who is that guy? Who's that? Which is a great story, right? Oh, the Suns have a guy like Collin Gillespie who is shocking the celebrities in LA. You have J.J. Redick saying, I don't remember telling my team to go under lasers. Of course, that meaning somebody who is a laser from deep. I think you can make the same argument the Phoenix Suns. They caught a lot of people by surprise at the beginning of the season. A lot of teams were kind of taken aback by just the sheer effort that they were able to give and kind of shocked that they would give that on a night-to-night basis and just outwork them because the Suns were supposed to be bad. So what happened? Did Collin hit a wall, or did NBA teams move him up on the scouting report? Maybe they spend a lot of time trying to find ways to neutralize him. Maybe they know that if they run him a certain way off of these screens, if they chase him, if they put a little pressure on him to go left, to go right, that they can maybe take that three-point percentage from 42% to 40% to 38%. And those are the type of margins that drastically change an archetype like Collin Gillespie's impact, right? Now, Collin will give you the extra stuff. He's going to give you the rebounding. He's going to give you the playmaking. He's going to give you the hustle and the grit on defense, but there are also certain limitations when it comes to his size. So the teams say, well, we're going to put him in a lot more actions. We're going to attack him a lot more on defense and then tire him out on offense because we know he hit a wall. So the question is, did he get scouted? Did teams get used to him now? And did he move up higher on the scouting report? And was he able to take that into account? And maybe he wasn't able to play the same way he did at the beginning of the season. I think that's possible. I also think the reemergence of Jalen Green, I don't want to say threw a wrench into things because I certainly think that there's a way that those guards can coexist. You think about the Charlotte game where all three of them had 20-plus points. There's certainly a way for them to coexist, but Collin was very much in a groove, and then there's another dynamic guard that the offense is built around that then instantly gets put into the rotation. I think realistically it's a lot of these things, right? It's Collin Gillespie started off really hot, and maybe teams weren't paying a lot of attention to him, and then after they start paying attention to him, okay, cool, now we're going to be able to eliminate him a little bit more. It could probably be the fact that he played over 5 times the amount of minutes he played last season this year, and that ended up catching up to him. And it could also just be that he went through a shooting slump or that his shoulder got injured. And that just kind of happens for guys who are vastly taking three-pointers, is you're going to have very, very high highs and very low lows. At the end of the day, this is not a Supermax contract that Collin Gillespie is getting. This is not even close to a Supermax contract. This is reportedly, according to Shams Charania, if you're just joining us now, a 4-year, $48 million deal for the Phoenix Suns and Collin Gillespie. So what does that mean? That means that if the latter is true, let's say some of the struggles persist. Let's say maybe he isn't a player that can give you 20-plus minutes per game in the playoffs. Well, okay. You're not paying him $20+ million. You're not paying him $25+ million. And that is a contract that other teams are not going to turn their nose at if it gets to that, which I don't think it will, because Collin represents the culture and Collin represents a very specific skill set the Suns love, and that is three-point shooting. So this is a win-win situation for both sides. This is a win for the Phoenix Suns. You lock up your culture guy. You do it before really free agency even starts. You get your books in order because you have very thin margins to operate outside of signing Collin Gillespie, outside of now reportedly focusing in on signing Jordan Goodwin, and outside of course, the Mark Williams conundrum that we've covered in depth this entire week in our shows and, of course, in our mailbag episode. So you now know what you're operating with. Maybe we don't know the specific details yet from a public perspective, but the Suns certainly do. Now, the Suns now have a guy who's very publicly been like, I believe in this team. I want to be back in this team. I want to be back in the Valley. And he invests in them. And he insists on coming back. And honestly, he probably took a pay cut. I could have seen Collin getting anywhere from $14 to $15 million per year. And he's under contract for a long time. Now, we don't know if it's a player option or a club option, but any type of team control in these situations as the salary cap goes up usually means this contract will age well unless it's insane accelerating annual average value over the last couple of years, which means actually he saves more money this upcoming season for the Suns, which might allow them to go sign somebody this offseason. There's pros and cons to both sides. Let's get to some super chats here as we continue to celebrate Collin Gillespie re-signing reportedly with the Phoenix Suns, according to Shams Charania, for a 4-year, $48 million deal. This super chat is from Psycho Blue. Thank you so much, Psycho Blue, for the $10 super chat. Says Collin and Phoenix won't have to worry about teams taking them more seriously next year because the national media has the Suns almost universally a bottom 10 team. So they'll surprise them all over again. I hear you. I do hear you. But I think what happened with the Suns, it wasn't necessarily that teams were surprised because the national media was like, oh, the Suns are going to be bad. Now, I'm sure that there were some preconceived notions and expectations for the Suns going into the year in scouting departments, and I'm sure that they weren't expected to be anywhere close to how good they were. I totally agree with that. But I don't think any coaching staff is going to go into the meeting prepping for the Suns going into this season or going into the first couple of games of the season and go, hey, that guy that just set the single season franchise record for three-pointers made, yeah, he might have dipped in the playoffs, but that guy is still an incredible shooter. And maybe he's just an incredible 82-game player. Now, maybe he ran into OKC and had to guard Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and OKC's incredible perimeter defense led by Cason Wallace, Shai, Lou Dort, Alex Caruso, and some of the best individual perimeter defenders the league has to offer sharing the same team in the same uniform. That could also totally be the case, while also sharing the court without a true traditional big and Mark Williams, without sharing the court with Grayson Allen. Like, there are reasons why Collin Gillespie could have struggled besides the fact that maybe Collin Gillespie is somebody who's questionable when it comes to playoff time, but he hasn't had a lot of time to actually go prove himself. And I'm not saying that I think he's going to be questionable in the playoffs. I think his inherent skill of three-point shooting, his give and F attitude on defense, his hustle, his rebounding, and his playmaking, which I think actually did shine decent, even though the assists per game numbers weren't there in the playoffs. You saw some really, really good reads, especially between him and Oso, which is a dynamic we could talk about a little bit going forward as well as far as his chemistry with all these players. Like, Collin, I think, can play in the playoffs. I think he can, and I think he could be a rotation player. Now, can he start for you in the playoffs? I would say ideally no. If you're looking to win a playoff series, win a couple playoff series, the Gillespie archetype, and, stop me if you've heard this before, the Peyton Pritchard archetype, right? The TJ McConnell archetype. Even though they're different players. Now, Peyton Pritchard, I think, is a little bit more similar than TJ McConnell. TJ McConnell. there is a ceiling when you have a very small starting lineup. And if the Suns are going to start Jalen at the 2 and they're going to start Book at the 3, that inherently is going to be just a little bit smaller, even though Book does measure out to be around average small forward size. He certainly plays like a guard. So Collin coming off of the bench, and I know a lot of people, including myself, were kind of arguing for this after he hit his dip after All-Star break last season. And yes, his new nickname is now TJ McCollin. Is that he should be off the bench because it's the best for both parties. Now, coming off of the bench is not an insult. I want to get that clear. Manu Ginobili came off of the bench, right? Now, is Collin Manu Ginobili? No, he's not. Not yet. But good players coming off of the bench is the mark of it, not a championship team, but let's just call them a good team. Let's call them a certified playoff team. Let's call them a certified team that can make it to the postseason and win a series or two. You need to have guys who can start for you coming off of the bench. Collin Gillespie has proven this past season that he can start and that he will start for you and give you decent minutes. He can play alongside Book and can play alongside Dylan and can play alongside Mark and can play alongside Oso if he needs to. And that's great. That's a great asset to have, especially over a long, grueling 82-game season where, as Suns fans, we know you're going to deal with a lot of injuries. But if he's coming off of the bench, and you've got a guy who could shoot the rock like that coming off the bench, who's going to be a defensive pest picking up the entire full court. You've got a guy who can pass the ball, has great chemistry with presumably your backup center, and Oso Ighodaro, probably the best two-man game on the Suns point blank period. And you have that guy coming off the bench for the next 4 years. That is such a great deal for the Suns, and that's a great situation for Gillespie. Maybe he could have gone and gotten $14 million per year somewhere else. Maybe $15 million per year somewhere else. He certainly has the most valuable skill in all of the NBA right now, which is three-point shooting. And he did it at about as high a level as anybody could possibly do. He's not old. In fact, he doesn't have a lot of miles on his body, considering that he hasn't played more than one full season in the league. So I could have seen a Brooklyn, right, who is the only team who's operating with a ton of cap space, go out there and give Collin a huge offer sheet, right? I could totally see that happening. But for Collin, it probably makes sense to forego a couple extra $1 million per year for a couple of things. One, I don't know if any other franchises were going to give him $14 million or may give him 4 years. I think 4 years is a pretty long commitment, and you could, if you're Collin's agent, maybe say that caps him as far as what he can make going forward, a 1-year deal or a 2-year deal or 2 years in a player option, which maybe there's a player option at the end of the 4 years here. Maybe it's a team option. I would presume probably a player option. But you would give yourself the ability to earn more money faster, either by hitting free agency faster or by getting paid more right now. And while that certainly has to be tantalizing for a guy who's only made legit full-time league money at a minimum level for 1 year, it is a smart decision to A, stay with the franchise that invested in you, believed in you, gave you your first contract, and has a coaching staff and a set of players that you know you can succeed with and that they will give you the green light to do what you can do and maybe hide some of the things that you can't do, but also commit for the long term. I think the Suns are going to become one of these organizations that, sure, they might make moves. I doubt that they go and do what they did for the KD era and the Beal era and whatnot. But I think they're going to start being one of those franchises that has those long-term role players again. Now, you see it with a lot of these top-end franchises. They cycle through guys. You look at the Oklahoma City Thunder, right? And the Oklahoma City Thunder, after they lost lost in the Western Conference Finals, go and add Hartenstein, go and add Caruso, and obviously they're going to be in a lot better of a situation, okay? But what else happened in OKC? Not to say the Suns are OKC, but just walk with me here. They retained all their high-level role players on very good contracts, right? This is what good teams do. Yes, you have to shuffle in pieces. Is this the only move the Suns should make in free agency? No. Like Hello says, they probably need to go get a power forward, right? We've talked about that ad nauseum. They probably need to find a center, whether that's Mark Williams or another veteran, maybe at a vet minimum. We still have to figure that out as well. They need to re-sign Jordan Goodwin, who's obviously a guard and a forward at this point. Like, this is not the only thing they can do, but this is an important first step. It's important to not have to worry about it, and it's important to have him locked up for both sides. Collin Gillespie is still going to play with that hunger that he had this last season. That's not going to go away, because you want to know when Collin Gillespie is going to hit the open market? When he's 30 years old. Unless, of course, there's a player option and he opts into the player option or whatever it is, right? 30 years old. That is probably going to be a situation where Collin can get a very, very good deal. If Collin takes the next 2 to 3 years, and let's say he maintains what he did this year, and maybe instead of dropping off at the end, let's say he doesn't start as hot, but he doesn't fall off as much, and he's just kind of consistent. Shoots 40% from three, gets close to the franchise records in three-pointers made, starts a little bit, mainly comes off of the bench, and averages anywhere from 12 to 14 points per game. If he does that for 2 more years, 3 more years, and he hits the open market, that guy could be making probably close to $20 million at this point. If he does all the other things as well, and it comes with high-level winning. Now, I know that sounds like a big deal, but remember, of course, the salary cap is going to go up. And so the average annual value that he's going to sign to is also going to be going up as well. I want you guys to let us know down in the comments below what you think of this deal. I've just been going here for 25 minutes, so I have not been reading your comments, if I'm being completely honest with you. But this is still a really, really good deal in my opinion, but I would love to know what you all think. Remember to hit that like button. Remember to hit that subscribe button as well. We're going to get Gil in here in just a second, so make sure you guys hit that like button if you want to hear, of course, Gil the Thrill McGregor come in here and talk about a little continuity in action. I see him smiling behind the scenes here. But yeah, I do appreciate everybody showing up here on a Saturday. Again, if you are joining us late and you're wondering the actual figures for Collin Gillespie, reportedly, according to ESPN Sean Sharania, Collin Gillespie intends to sign a 4-year, $48 million deal to return to the Phoenix Suns. Not just the first Phoenix Suns free agent to make his intentions known, but the first free agent, period, to make their intentions known. Let's go ahead and bring Gil in here and talk a little bit of Suns basketball with the guy himself.
Yo.
Dude, hello.
What's up, man?
I'm going to take a sip of water. So
yes, take a second, man. You went ISO for 25 minutes. That's pretty impressive, brother.
The floor is yours, Gil.
The floor is mine. Well, wasn't expecting to see this today. Excited to see it today. I knew it was going to, well, we didn't know it was going to happen, but we had a feeling that it was going to happen at some point, especially when we learned that coming into the offseason, the Suns were going to prioritize Collin Gillespie and Jordan Goodwin, and having the leg up of being able to begin the negotiations with them when the season officially ended with the finals was good for this team. What we see now is how big of a priority it was. Great deal. I think good value for him. I saw Espo tweet about it saying that this is what Suns culture is about. Somebody buys into what this franchise is. They become a part of the developmental process and program. They evolve. They continue to grow. They continue to kind of break through, because I think there have been multiple times throughout Collin's time in a Suns uniform that many probably thought, well, he's reached the peak of what he can be as an NBA player. And all he did was exceed those expectations. And I think about so many moments and memories this year. Timberwolves game comes to mind. Portland Trailblazers games come to mind. The record that he set this year. So it's so important to now have this example in real time of, hey, we can develop. And it doesn't happen for everybody, but an undrafted guy who didn't necessarily get a fair shake in his first career stops, comes here, good opportunity, great team around him, has an opportunity to really buy in, and it comes back to him tenfold. So if nothing else, I'm super happy for Collin Gillespie to see him get his payday. It's always cool to see the underdogs win. And now to see him be another example of development for this franchise. And it's one less question mark as we go into the offseason as far as what he's going to be. He's going to be around. And now we can start thinking a little bit more about what's next. But also when you start to do your projections and everything for next season, you can no longer have a question mark beside Collin Gillespie. You know he's going to be a part of whatever this team is doing.
Yeah, super happy for Collin. He's definitely earned it. And Espo's right. You're right. This is also the Suns signaling to the rest of the NBA that, like, we take care of our own, right? If you come here and you end up surprising people, let's say you're a two-way guy and you play good enough to get NBA minutes, we're going to give you NBA minutes, right? And let's say that you play really good high-level basketball for us, we're going to make it our top priority, even if you are not a top free agent on the market, which, I mean, I love Collin Gillespie. We all love Collin Gillespie, but anybody who's signing for under $20 million per year is not going to be a top a free agent out there on the market. right? So we're going to go out there. We're going to make you the first deal. Like, this is Collin Gillespie Day in the NBA. This is the only news. All that we've got in this NBA offseason is that Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is reportedly going to opt in on his $20 million per year player option, and that Collin Gillespie is going to be signing as a free agent for the Phoenix Suns. So the Suns are signaling to the rest of the NBA, if you come here and you play well and you buy into our system and you get on the court and you win games for us, we're going to take care of you and take care of you well. Collin's getting a good amount of money. Like, I don't think Collin took a pay cut. I think it's a good price for him, but I don't think he took a pay cut. You look at Bouye. Bouye got converted to a standard contract after being found here and ends up playing a ton. Like, Dillon is in, of course, reported contract extension negotiations with the Suns. I think if you put me to a truth detector, I tell you that I fully expect him to re-sign here or not re-sign, but to extend here at a reasonable rate, right? So, Gil, it's about trust, right? And it's about kind of rebuilding this franchise's image. And Collin Gillespie can be the poster child for that.
Absolutely. And it's funny because it showed itself when throughout there were little crumbs to kind of give us an idea of what to expect. Maybe there's Collin saying, I think everybody knows I want to be back here. He said it multiple times. He said it at his exit interview. He said it mid-season when he started to have a breakout and there was talks about, hey, your contract's up. Like, what does the future hold for you? And taking care of your own is something that's really important. And the other thing that we've talked about so much with this franchise, and something you mentioned, rebuilding trust with players, but also building some type of identity of how you go by your players and how you do right by your players. It's finding guys in the margins, because we know the limitations that this franchise finds itself dealing with because of some of the financial obligations that they unfortunately have no control over. So can you identify undrafted talent? Can you identify guys who have not gotten the best shake or haven't had an opportunity to show what they're capable of doing in their previous stop? Then what happens when they get where you have them? Do you convert to a guys to standard contracts? Do you give guys who are making veterans minimums big playing time because of what they bring to the table? And then when they outplay the contract that they're playing under, how do you reward them after the fact? We're having this conversation about Collin Gillespie. I'm really excited and look forward, and fingers crossed you'll be able to have the same conversation about Jordan Goodwin here soon down the line. And it gives me confidence that we're going to be able to do that as well. So the fact that he gets the spotlight as well, I have people texting me. I got texted the Collin Gillespie news twice from the East Coast about what's going on. You're seeing people around the country talk about, he's a winner. He won at Villanova. He's winning big with the Suns as well. So the fact that Collin Gillespie and his story is also the conversation of the day as well says a lot about the way the Suns value him and the priority to get it done here. We're still 10 days out from free agency beginning league-wide, and to have this done in principle right now, reportedly, is massive for that reason too.
Yeah, this is, again, I've said it before, it's a massive win-win. And somebody else who's winning is the Freckled Mamba, says, me and Collin already at the club. It's lit. Gil, I do want to get your take, though, on some of the other things I discussed before you got here. Of course, you were, I don't know, also covering another basketball team. I guess we'll allow it. I like your hoodie, by the way.
They won today.
Let's go, the Mercury. What a day for
wins
Valley
all around, honestly.
Right? Collin Gillespie wins, the Mercury win, the Suns win, PHNX Suns wins, the fans win, everybody's winning. But Gil, there are concerns, and we've talked about this on the show, and I'm by no means trying to rain on Collin Gillespie's much-deserved parade, because we've said it over and over again how much we really wanted the Suns to bring him back. I'll bring this graphic back up. We've discussed it on the show before. I discussed it earlier today. This is obviously his regular season versus postseason drop-off. We know about the end of the season struggles for Collin. We know about maybe some of the reasons as to why that could have happened. What's your stance on maybe some of the doubters, some of the skeptics when it comes to Collin Gillespie and signing him to a 4-year, $48 million deal?
I think two things, and one, we need to see the breakdown of the money, right? So I think that's where we hold some judgment to base on how this contract is worded and how the finances play out. Like, it could just be flat. And I don't know if this has been reported or not yet, but I don't know if it's like 12 flat for every year. Is it ascending? Does it descend? I think that should impact how you feel about it in some respects. We've talked about maybe the shoulder was bothering him. We saw how aggressive that cupping that he was receiving that latter part of the season and in the postseason. There's no way to hide it. I don't think he was doing it to have a built-in excuse. I think that whatever he was dealing with the shoulder was pretty significant. And there was also the fact that, oh yeah, that team that they played in the first round of the playoffs has pretty good defense, and they're designed to make life hell for players who are like Collin Gillespie. Now, that being said, the biggest thing that I would say as far as that goes, throw all of those variables out. If you're just looking at it the way it is, Collin had a good start to the season, and he had a less than good, or took a step back when the season ended. And when we talked to him, he was one of a few players that was made available at the end of season exit interviews. He was very transparent about the ways in which he can improve. He was very transparent about the fact that he was going to take some time to rewatch the entire playoff series and learn more about what the Thunder did to make life hell for him. He was probably going to go back and look at why he had the fall off that he had toward the end of the season. If it was for one of the reasons that we discussed, he knows that. But he talked about getting stronger. He talked about improving off the ball, on the ball, all these things that he wants to do. I think that it's so important to remind yourself that in some ways he is a late bloomer. We've seen it happen with guys, and I know I make the comparison. They are not one for one. They're not the same player, but I do look at Fred VanVleet as a guy who was undrafted, undersized guard, had a bit of a breakout in his third NBA season, and came from a winning program in college. And I say that to say it's very important because you learn what goes into winning foundationally. You understand the importance of player development and the work that goes into it. And who is he? He's Villain Jr. And Villain Sr. is the hardest working guy in the locker room if you let anybody tell it. So if he's following that example, I think he's not going to rest and not going to accept some of the shortcomings that he had this past season. So I do think that Collin, as far as player development, is still ascending. It might not necessarily show up in the numbers, but I think it's going to show up in his understanding of the game, his ability to have an impact in different ways. So I understand detractors, but I also recognize he's really important to this team, and I still think he has improvement to make.
Espo says it really well in the chat. Appreciate Espo being in here with us as well. Says contract is a value for what Collin did last year. Imagine the steal it will be if he keeps getting better. Now, it's by no means guaranteed that he does get better. I think if he does just kind of remain the same, it's still a relatively good contract value, maybe slightly rich, but I think still a good contract. But I would expect him to get better. I mean, like you said, a late bloomer, somebody who hasn't had a lot of time in the league, but also an incredibly hard worker, and somebody who, because he hasn't had a lot of time in the league, Gil, he hasn't really had time to use legitimate real game reps to improve his game. Right? Like, and again, I think people might scoff at that because at the end of the season, he got worse, right? Just statistically speaking. Now, there are reasons for it, but at the end of the day, like, when we look back at NBA history, what do we look at? Players' performances. We don't always look at what their injury is, or if it was their first season in there, if they hit a wall, or what extenuating circumstances, even stuff off the court, right? Like, you know, Luka's season will not be remembered for what maybe some of the reports were off the court. It's going to be, what did you do on the court? What didn't you do on the court? Were you available or were you not available? Right? That's just kind of how we, as a kind of organism consuming basketball, like that's how we talk about it. And I don't think it's a bad thing. That's just, there's so much of it that when you look back 5 years from now, 10 years from now, like there's only so much that you can retain and really talk about like in depth as far as that type of nuance. So if Collin is the type of guy who hits a wall mid-season, like that's going to be a problem. And there is a chance that maybe he is, right? But I don't think so. And I think that conditioning will certainly be something for him to work on. I think he needs to work on that kind of in-between midi game. We saw him break it out a couple of times against OKC, and it was pretty effective. Like, he shot a good percentage. He just didn't go to it. So being able to get those types of shots off, not just open threes, not just off the dribble threes or coming off and curling off of screens and then hitting threes, like that's all well and good. But you got to be somewhat of a three-level scorer in the playoffs to really make your threat, unless you're a really tall three-point shooter. So Collin needs to work on the midi game. He needs to maybe work on that float game, because when he gets to the paint, usually he's getting blocked. But these are all things, Gil, that like if anybody's going to figure it out, I do think Collin will figure it out. Not that he's going to end up being the best player on the team by any means, but he's going to be hungry. Like, nobody on the Suns is going to be happy with how they went out, whether they get a new shiny contract this offseason or not. So I'm excited to see what Collin Gillespie 3.0 looks like for the Suns, and if he continues this ascension, just how high he can go.
And one thing that also comes to mind, first when you mentioned the midi, I thought about the one shot he made against Portland in that play-in tournament game was a end of first quarter midi, and I was like, oh, Collin's back. He's about to have a game, and then he didn't score again after that, and that kind of factored into those postseason averages. But the other part, too, before I talk about the improvement piece, is that the people who are paid to make these decisions, to evaluate contracts and, figure out what's a good market price for retaining Collin, they understand the projections and they understand what he can be and how much better he can be. So this 4 for 48 doesn't just come out of nowhere. I don't necessarily think that they're just outbidding themselves. I think there was an understanding that this is going to be the market. And to your point, what you talked about earlier, another team potentially swooping in because they see his value. So it's fair so much what he did last year and what he can do moving forward. And the other part, speaking on the improvement part and getting better part, a lot of things that were out of his control that had nothing to do with him impacted in this past season. He played more games than he played in his career, his first 2 seasons combined. And there were injuries on this team throughout this roster that required him to play outside of himself for a much longer period of time than anybody probably would have ever asked him to or expected him to. And for the majority of that period of time in which he was doing that, Collin exceeded those expectations. I think it's understandable for anybody that's asked to produce and do over 100% of what they were actually expected to do to at some point hit some type of wall. And when you hit that wall, you're probably going to get 60 or 70% of what they were giving before. But much like the Suns team this year, the expectations were reset for what Collin could do and who he could be because we saw it consistently in real time. Everybody else's health, he has no hand in that. But this upcoming season, if we see more health from Jalen Green and Devin Booker and those guys, and Collin isn't asked as much to be that spot guy that fills in the blanks consistently, if he can do it one-off every now and then 2 or 3 times every 2 weeks rather than night after night after night, I think we see more of a sustainable season-long turn-in of what Collin was able to do when he impressed us so much this past season.
Yeah. Keith Smith, of course, does incredible work over at Spot Track. We're actually going to have him on later in this upcoming week to preview free agency. So definitely, if you're new to the channel, stay tuned for that. We'll be doing a draft show on Tuesday and on Wednesday as well, completely live throughout the first and second rounds of the draft, plus 3 p.m. shows every single day of the week, talking about everything Phoenix Suns related, NBA related. We have a really good time over here at PHNX Sports. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button for everybody spending some time on your Saturday afternoon with us. But Keith Smith over at Spot Track just says $12 million annual average value. If you use standard raises, the contract would break down something like this. Now, again, we don't know if this is how it is, but normal standard ascending contracts, which is probably the most likely. This upcoming season, he'll make $10.7 million. The following season, 11.6. The following season, 12.4. And the following season, 13.3. That's not bad. $10 million for Gillespie this upcoming year gives you a little bit of wiggle room when it comes to Jordan Goodwin. Now, if you could get Jordan Goodwin for less than $5 million and keep both of them in around that MLE, there were some people out there who expected Collin to garner the same level of value as the MLE, which is $15 million. So that would be a huge win. Of course, we don't know what's going to happen with Jordan Goodwin. I expect him to be a very early domino in free agency as well, if not somebody else that is reported to intend to sign with the Phoenix Suns before free agency starts, not this upcoming Tuesday, but the following one. But how would you feel if it goes from 10.7 to 13.3 over the next 4 years? Do you feel like that's the best way to structure this contract for both sides?
That feels fair because you start thinking about the bigger picture in the future, and obviously the dead money is going to be an issue for some time, but it increasing when you have less and less financial peril, I guess, elsewhere, because there are going to be some contracts that come off the books. There are guys who have a year or 2 remaining, and when those things come off the books and you're paying Collin and his contract is increasing as far as average annual or just annual value, is increasing, you are still kind of navigating it in a way that feels okay for you. And you can potentially have your younger guys replace some of the production from guys who are coming off the books or renegotiate with that as well. And again, we know it's a priority to retain homegrown talent or retain essentially homegrown talent as well. So it feels like going up is the way, if that is the case that we see. Makes a lot of sense, especially knowing that salary caps also increase year over year, be it by a couple $1 million or even more than that. So all of that would feel aligned in that way.
Yeah. Aligned, I think, is how we're feeling. Dude, I'm scrolling on Twitter here and just kind of looking at things as we'll probably start to wind down here in just a little bit with, of course, a show on Monday. But everybody is saying, man, this is great value for the Suns. And we'll get Steven's opinion on this here in a second. We'll bring him in. But the average kind of reaction is, what a great deal for the Suns. What a great return on investment. What a great story. So if that's your overarching opinion, I think the Suns did a good job. So let's go ahead and let's bring in Stephen Prejean Garner, get a little context to this situation. Whoa, he's just right next to you. Wow. Hello. Hey, Stephen. How's it going?
Surprise.
Oh, mic's not on. Okay, a true surprise, but yeah. I can't hear you, Stephen. Let's see. Are you on now?
Good. What's going on?
How about
there
that?
You are.
There we go.
Hi, my friend.
I'm chilling. How y'all doing?
Doing good, man. Your initial thoughts, 4 years, reported $48 million for Collin Gillespie. How are you feeling about that?
Much earned. I think matters less about what I think, and it matters more about what he earned. That's how he kind of got himself in this situation. I think it matters a lot that he has put in the work that he has over the course of this season, and even more so starting at the end of the season before last, to put himself in this position. Has made a home, not just found a home, has made a home because of the work he's done. And now he's one of the most clear examples of, if you do this well and listening to the internal of the Suns and doing your work on your own accord, then you could see yourself in an opportunity like Collin earned his way into. And I think that's as valuable as anything for a team that is looking to reestablish itself in this new era of Phoenix Suns basketball.
One of the things that we were thinking about was just the number itself. And you walked in as I was talking about the value of it. And we talked a lot about Collin and expectations and how the season went for him. When you hear that number, do you think that it also comes with it a certain level of expectation based on the highs and lows that we saw from Collin this past year and the role he's about to have to play with this team this upcoming season?
So if he averaged 12.7 points per game, let's just say he shot 87, almost 88% from the free throw line. Let's just say he shot 40% on north of 7 attempts from deep. Let's just say he also crushed the franchise record for threes. Would that season alone had checked off the box for equating to that value of that contract by you and by, I don't know if Eric bounced off for a second. But would either of you feel like that type of season sustained would check off that box for him?
Yeah, I think so. And we talked a little bit about the context of it, especially knowing that he put those numbers up with some highs and some lows, and it averaged out and balanced out that way. And one of the things I mentioned before you came in here was that I think that a big part of some of the variance was that he was asked to do way more than, quite frankly, he probably should have ever been asked to do. And it was because of things that weren't in his control. It was because Jalen Green was unavailable for much longer than anybody expected Jalen Green to be unavailable. And Collin played so well that he earned the right to be that spot starter. Whoever was out, he started 56, I think, of the 80 games that he appeared in. And he started in place of a number of different guys because they would turn to him in those spots. And he still figured things out in real time. And he also was able to adjust and navigate to other teams becoming more familiar with who he was, except like the Trailblazers, who were still going under screens when he knocked down 8 threes in that game. And one of the things that I talked about, and I want to hear your opinion on it, is, and I think you asked him the question at the exit interviews, but when Collin talked so much about the ways that he wants to try to improve this offseason, what do you think is the biggest thing that you want to see Collin Gillespie come back 2026, 27, new and improved in this specific area to not just live up to the contract, because he's earned that already, but live up to the role that they need him to be for them to take a step forward next year?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And that's how you can kind of speak about him rounding out his role with the team. I think the demands on his 3-point shooting, he overachieved and overexceeded those expectations. He went from shooting 2.7 attempts a game the season before last in the 33 games he appeared in to shooting 7.2. So that 2.7 just flipped around into 7.2 in terms of attempts per game, and still shot over 40% from deep on those. Like that's a hefty burden and shot diet for anybody to kind of wear for a team. And to do that at a 40% clip probably means you could get up 1 or 2 more and still be expected to be around that 38 to 37% clip and still have that same impact on value return for your team. So I won't go the 3-point shooting route because I think that is his supreme skill. And then I think he can kind of add to his game by having more counters in his bag. So you get him pick and roll, you got a big and drop coverage. Is it just 3 ball or not for you? Or are you able to turn that corner and be not necessarily Devin Booker from the midi, but can you be consistent enough that adds another wrinkle to your overall dynamic? If you're able to kind of do that, now what does that do for your opportunities to potentially take another dribble and get downhill? Starting with that midi and then being able to have teams know that, okay, if this guy comes off the screen and we're in drop coverage, he can punish us from 3, but if his 3 is not falling, that's not just the solve because he can have other dynamics of his game that go to. So we've seen him knock down that shot a little bit. He kind of went to it a little bit more incrementally over the course of last season as he saw, to your point, the scouting report shift a little bit and teams get more familiar with his game. But if that midi kind of becomes a little bit more of not just in addition to, but more of kind of a main ingredient to kind of balance out his game, now I think that helps his playmaking more. Now I think that helps all of the other things that he already does very well offensively.
PHNX Suns here reacting to the news that Collin Gillespie is reportedly set to re-sign with the Suns on a 4-year, $48 million deal. Gil McGregor here with Stephen Prejean Garner. Eric Ruby did bring you guys in and went ISO for 25 minutes, and because of that, he has subbed himself out for a little bit. So it is just us two here now to wrap things up. Eric might pop back in if there's still some time to talk about anything else with Collin Gillespie. And one of the things you mentioned was how the playmaking and everything goes hand in hand. And there's been a lot of talk and a lot of discussion about getting Devin Booker off the ball. And we've seen it some. We would probably say it's fair to say that if you're thinking in the sense of size and player profile, that Collin Gillespie is the closest thing to a quote-unquote pure point guard on this roster. And even still, he is not traditional in most of those senses. Do you think that more or less or the same of that, or expect to see some of those types of things be put on his plate once again this year, especially if the big variable and health and everybody being available at this team's disposal much longer than they were this past year? You think that's a big deal?
I won't say it's a big deal. I think it's going to be very important for them, though, because to whom much is given, much is tested. Collin's earned every coin that the team is rumored to be kind of having on the table for him once free agency officially gets rolling and everything. So with that is going to come more expectations. And that's no different than kind of what Jordan Knott already laid the foundation for last season. Collin, you can shoot the 3-ball well, cool. Can you maybe space it a little bit further? Can you maybe take a couple more pull-up threes in particular? Be more aggressive finding that shot, not just allowing for Devin Booker and Grayson and Jalen to find you. Can you go and hunt out those shots on your own accord? It's cool when you show that you can do something very well, even if it's just your overarching level of play. What about if you take that to another level? What does that do for the rest of the team? Does that kind of raise the floor? Does that raise the ceiling for some of the lineups that you're involved with, especially those 6-man lineups that we saw that were very fruitful for the Suns in the early portion of the season? So I'm kind of looking at things through that lens. Collin was a great offensive rebounder, especially at the point guard position last season. What about if he grabs or tips out a couple more of those? What about if he's just kind of more maniacal and finding ways to score off of those offensive rebounds? Like, I think there's things on the margins that I'm sure he's already been in Jordan Knott's ear and vice versa about, okay, what if we tried this? What if we did that? How much more can we add impact to his game?
Thinking about the fact they got this done, and it's no question this is a priority. I was saying before you walked in, we're just 10 days before free agency begins. And obviously it's going to take some time and some formalities and caution tape to work around before the dotted line will be signed and the ink will dry. But by all intents and purposes, this is one major thing that is no longer a concern or worry that you can check that box. And the draft is in a few days, and this may or may not impact how important this team sees it to bring in another guard. And it also maybe gives you some flexibility with people who you may or may not be willing to part ways with if there's any overlap, or if you see Collin maybe taking up a bigger chunk of minutes if you think the best role for him requires that and somebody else becomes a little more expendable. And that's what I keep coming back to, Stephen, is the ideal role for him. Last year, I said it already, a lot was asked of him. He stepped up and he earned this deal because he did so. You just said to him, much is given, much is tested, much is required. And he has received that deal. He has a deal to live up to. But as of right now, and let's just think through the lens of, hey, look, they're still trying to retain Goody. I think until we're told otherwise, that's probably going to happen. Collin best suited as your sixth man? Is this sixth man money? And what does that do for a guy like Grayson Allen? Does Grayson Allen take a step back and now he's your seventh, eighth man? Is Collin, do you expect him to maybe even be perfect world in that sixth man of the year conversation next year?
I think that's if we're talking about the ceiling of ceilings for Collin, I think that's it. I think naturally, if the Suns strike a better bit of health in favor of Collin staying in that super starter role, I think he's probably more viable in that sixth player of the year race, and that also the most improved race for that matter, just because of the ways in which things kind of swung out. Yeah, that was tough, but I think if he's kind of able to be set up a little bit more, just for success in role more than kind of being not overtasked, because he proved to be up to the task more often than not, but to kind of be in the perfect type of role that the team is constructed for him to be in, I think that will help him a lot. To which I ask a question to you. Do you think it would be good for Collin to be in that role to then maybe allow for a player like Grayson, and domino effect wise, a player like Royce to play more to their top tier skills versus, I think those three guys were probably leaned on the most for playing past what their role that the roster was built for is maybe suggested last season because of injury?
It's tricky because when you think about where we are right now, the Mark Williams is the biggest question mark, I think, of everything right now, but we're pretty confident in knowing four members of the starting lineup, or three members of the starting lineup, I guess you could say. And if Collin is coming off the bench still, and that's, a sixth man, and then I don't think Grayson's going to start with Book, Devin, then he could. But you're talking, and you start getting to Rasheer and man, we're basically spelling out a rotation at this point. And then you go from continuity to they're just kind of running it back, albeit with betting on more health and betting on more internal development. So I do think it's a very thin line when you think about him playing in a specific role and Grayson and Royce and the young guys as well being able to just kind of star in different roles, because it does give me a little pause in wondering how similar is this going to look to last year. And basically the biggest thing that's going to make it look different between last year and this year is if guys improve. And that is not a big ask of them. It's their job to literally improve, but it's also something that's not the easiest thing to do. You can't just do it. You have to figure it out, because it's not just a skill thing. It's an understanding thing, especially for the young guys. So I trust and believe in Collin. I think that, especially knowing that health is just something that happens, and you hope to have you can't get much of a worse shake than this team did last year. But, I think when it comes to the Grayson and Royce, and we talk about them so often in trade talks, potentially for good reason, because they're valuable veterans, and there are teams out there that would want and could want to use those guys. But if it comes to a point where there's a little overstepping, and you trust Collin, who's 26, 27 years old, to just take on the brunt of that, and maybe you answer a different question or a different need by trying to free up space or look elsewhere, you might believe that the answer is even on your roster, because we didn't even talk about we didn't talk about Ryan Dillon. I'm naming all of these guys, and all do different things. But I say that to say maybe one of those needs and answers that you can find, and you maybe can just give yourself some flexibility. So that's why I think so much we've talked about internal development being critical, is because it takes away a lot of the haze around what we're talking about right now. It makes it way more straightforward, way fewer questions about it. And we'll learn a lot, honestly, about that in about 2 weeks' time when these guys are out in Vegas playing.
Yeah, I think we are going to learn a lot about just kind of the way that the roster could potentially shapeshift and what continuity looks like in terms of not just what the decision making faction hopes for, but what they're actually able to execute based off of the things that are controllable, the things that are kind of unknown, the gray area, if you will. It'll be fun, and I think they're a nice piece of clay to kind of look at in terms of a roster. There's some different ways that they can kind of shapeshift. There's some ways they can go about trying to build out, especially the front court dynamic of their rotation. But it's gonna be fun to see how things develop, and I think that kind of leads to just something else that I've been having in mind with Collin a little bit, but just more so with the roster itself. Um, when you have someone like Collin that has ascended in role so rapidly, so quickly, even through the let's just say what left a lot to be desired in the 24-25 season for the Suns, to kind of have someone that's kind of risen to these extents. For you, Gil, do you feel like there's truly incentive internally to saying like, hey, we can always point to this guy if somebody's in some type of rut, especially the younger guys, that kind of proof of concept dynamic?
Twofold. I think it's the younger guys you have, because you actually took the thought of my brain, because I literally was gonna say that. So there's a little alignment with us as well. But I was thinking about the fact that fans should find some comfort and confidence in that this guy figured it out. And it's important to remind yourself. So by the way, this is a perfect time for Collin. His birthday's in 5 days. So I can't think of very many better birthday presents than 48 M's.
For sure.
But I can't think of it. Actually, you're right. Yeah, exactly.
Don't know what that's like. I imagine it's pretty fun though.
Yeah, that would be great. But to think that this guy who turned 26 this time last year had the best NBA season of his career, and so oftentimes, and we are, not necessarily you and I specifically, but as a media space, are oftentimes guilty of talking about guys who are, 23, 24, 25 years old as being finished products, and there's no longer any time for them to develop or figure it out anymore. Guy having a career year who didn't get a fair shake early on in his career is a reminder that this could happen after 25. And we think about the young guys on this team who have so much potential, and specifically like a second year going to his third year guy like Ryan Dunn, who had 2 very different seasons given the regimes and situations that he found himself under. It takes a little bit longer. And we talk so much about how the development and the growth is not always linear. Now, microwave, crock pot, be patient with the development. Let it cook. Let these guys figure things out. So you have, for the fans, a proof of concept that, hey, sometimes it doesn't happen right away. It could happen at 24, 25. You have for yourself making marginal moves, signing undrafted free agents, adding guys who are off of waivers. Look what we did with Collin Gillespie. We figured him out. We put him in a position to succeed, and then we paid him because he earned what he got. He proved that he could do that. So I think this says a lot about the franchise, especially one that had a couple of rough goes and rough showings and rough years that needed to, in some ways, reestablish that type of understanding around the league and have people think that about you again. So I think that's big for the Suns.
Yeah, I think you said all of that very well. I think that upward mobility is truly a weapon when you talk about alignment. I think alignment sometimes is as simple as clarity. You have clarity in mindset, you have clarity in role, you have clarity in expectations placed upon you, you have clarity in route to success for whatever it is that you communicated your goals and desires are to your higher ups. And in this situation, it would be your head coach and your general manager. If Collin goes in and says, hey, I would love to be someone that's a borderline starter, somebody that's staking a significant claim to a rotation, somebody that is taking a position of accountability to the way this team's offense operates as not necessarily a traditional point guard, but a primary ball handling, primary kind of tone setting piece for the group. And you say, okay, cool, let's put some things on your plate to help you get to that point. And as you check off each box by each box consistently, you start to climb that ladder, and next thing you know, you've walked your way into 12 M's for 4 years. It's pretty good. That's pretty good. And I think that helps show others, I think, that someone getting a promotion in a situation maybe similar to you, or someone that you've just been around, kind of seeing them establish their escape velocity and then just ascend into that next level, whatever it is for them. I think that has to be motivation. I think that
positive
has to be
motivation, positive peer pressure,
100%. But coming just in the most organic way, it's like, nah, we just here working. We just here working. We just bringing our bricks. We just laying them up day by day. Next thing you know, somebody got their foundation built, and then you're looking at yours like, man, he was just where I was last year or 2 years ago. Like, this is not impossible. The opportunity is there. Now it's just a matter of, okay, am I sticking to the script with what it is I'm supposed to be doing, and am I leaning into those things in ways unique to me to get me to wherever my opportunity is?
Absolutely. We talk about so much of that and how it's important for this team and this franchise and what they're known for, and really just building the foundation, because a move like this doesn't necessarily win you a championship, but you don't win a championship without a foundation. And we just saw that in New York. We saw, listen, the stars are the ones who made the noise and they carried you home, but who was it that helped you get there? In the meantime, in some of those spots, it was the guys who you believed in, you built in, and they're not marginal guys. They're just really, really important guys. Speaking of a really, really important guy, Eric is now back, in FIFA World Cup. They're having their water breaks, and he took his water break. He's back here with us to wrap up some of our conversation about Collin Gillespie. Eric, I know you said you had one final thing that you really wanted to hit home with as far as this news with Collin Gillespie reportedly re-signing with the Suns, 4 years, $48 million, much earned after this big year of his.
Just when you said you guys did a really good job. I was listening to you. It was just very fantastic stuff.
Thanks,
there were some questions in the chat from Tosi saying, can we talk about how this affects our cap space? So we don't know for sure exactly how much Collin's going to get paid this next year. I will pull up this Phoenix Suns cap sheet again, just so that we can all kind of be on the same page as far as like who's getting what money. But going back to Keith Smith, who works for Spot Track and will be on the show at the end of this week, early next week, says, by my projections, the Suns will be roughly $4.6 million under the tax and $12.6 million under the first apron after re-signing Collin Gillespie. Says they can create more room if they move on from Haywood Highsmith or Jamari Bouye. It'll get tight to avoid the first apron if they re-sign Mark Williams and Jordan Goodwin. Now, the thing about the tax that I think people need to remember is that they count the tax based off of how you end the season. So you can go into the season in the tax, but it does not count towards repeater taxes and things of that nature unless you end the season in the tax, right? So it is almost for sure that they'll be in the tax, okay? $4.6 million outside of the tax. Jordan Goodwin will likely take up all of that. And then there's the whole Mark Williams. And if it's not Mark Williams, then okay, then, you got to find somebody with the MLE, and then that's a different conversation. So they are close to going into the rest of their cap space. And then they're about $12 million away from that first apron now. I know we all want to avoid aprons, but just so everybody's aware, that is based off of what Keith Smith predicts is going to be a standard elevated contract raise for the next 4 years for Collin Gillespie, which if you missed it earlier would have been 10.7 this upcoming year, then 11.6, then 12.4, then 13.3. So we don't know the numbers for sure. I doubt we get specific numbers immediately. We might have to wait a little bit to learn more on that. Maybe we get more. I could be completely wrong. But just so everybody's aware money-wise where this puts them, it's a decent amount of money, and the Suns don't have a lot to operate with, so it is going to restrict them a little bit. So I'm glad that we're all on the same page there. My final thoughts, Gil, on all of this is that I grade this signing an A-. I think that this was a really, really good deal with both sides. There's absolutely some risk in this, and I think that the Suns could find themselves in a position where paying, 12-ish, 13-ish million dollars per year in Collin Gillespie in 2 or 3 years could end up being a risk that wasn't worth taking, maybe in the long term. But I do think that optics-wise, and I do think that how I see things playing out for Collin at the end here and for the rest of his career, I see him continuing to get better, and I see him being a really good player that overperforms this. Everybody thinks Collin was going to get more money this offseason than what he got. The Suns retained him. They did it early, and they did it on what everybody else in the league considers a discount. So giving it an A-, a little bit of risk in there with a guy who's played 1 year and had a down second half of the year, but he deserves this. We appreciate everything that Collin's done for the Suns and has helped change that culture along with Jordan Ott and Devin Booker and Dylan Brooks and the very few that lasted from the season prior to this last one. So he deserves it. Big kudos to him. Suns fans should be excited. And that is my final thoughts. We can get your final thoughts, Gil, and then we have a super chat that we can get out of here on.
All right, yeah. My grade for it and final thought go hand in hand. I'm gonna go A-, so stealing what you said, but with the potential, I'm looking at you. I was looking at your paper the entire time, with the potential for it to be an A once we learn more about what the year over year looks like. I don't think this is something that you will turn to regret. We'll also have to learn about, how these years are averaged out, and if by chance there is some way and shape, form, and fashion, which I don't expect, I can expect them to continue to improve, but I don't think you'll find yourself kicking yourself saying, oh man, this didn't pan out the way we thought it would or the way we wanted it to. Ultimately, it's more of you reward somebody for coming up in your system the right way the system is meant to work out. And I think in the absolute worst case scenario, and I hate to say this while we're just enjoying him coming back, but like in the worst case scenario, that 12, 13, 14 million will fit nicely when you package it with other things if that happens, because we see it happen all the time. But best case scenario, Collin outplays this contract as well. I think there's a world in which that happens, and he's a part of what you have and a big part of the foundation of a winning team in the Western Conference that continues to improve. He continues to improve. This team continues to improve, and basketball in the Valley continues to improve.
Yeah, there is a lot to be excited about. A Nate Duncan tweet to get us out of here says, the league blew it on Gillespie. Should have had a full mid-level offer at least. Would have been a good signing for one of the cap space teams at above mid-level, especially considering how tax restrained the Suns are. Some people are thinking Collin should be getting $16 to $17 million per year. It looks like he'll be averaging around $12 million per year over the next 4. The Suns, I think, got a steal. And they turn their attention next to a guy named Jordan Goodwin. And that leaves us to a super chat from Altex. Always good to see Altex, longtime viewer and listener in here from the St. Louis area. Altex says, I'm waiting for that Goodwin extension before I get a jersey. But then again, he'll probably get traded and change his jersey number. That'd be my luck. Look, I don't think any of us, if Jordan Goodwin gets an extension here, which I think everybody expects him to be back, he's not going to get traded.
Too important.
He's not going to get traded. Maybe he'll change his number. Maybe he'll take number 1. And then we'll just kind of go from there. But look, Altex, we appreciate you. Appreciate hello, Toasty. Steven jumped in the chat. Brick Ripshaw is here. Michelle is in here. We got Eduardo in here. We got everybody hanging out with us and talking Collin Gillespie. Hit that like button on the way out. Lots of likes, but not enough yet. Appreciate Gil and Steven for hopping on right after covering a Mercury win.
Doubleheader.
What a Saturday for the PHNX crew. And again, if you are new to PHNX, you're saying, what do you mean covering a Mercury win? Well, we here at PHNX, we cover all your local teams. So Mercury, Cardinals, Diamondbacks, Sun Devils, U of A, like we have everything that you could possibly want. Southwest Bias every single weekday morning, covering all of your favorite Arizona sports. And we are just getting started on the Suns off season. We got a draft show coming live on the first round and the second round, Tuesday and Wednesday. We'll be live for the entirety of both, as the Suns could possibly trade into the first round or go into the second round with the 47th pick and possibly trade up from there. And then we've got free agency shows. We got free agency previews and live shows every single weekday of the offseason at 3 p.m. AZ time. So you can follow the show at PHNX_Suns. You can follow the Freckled Mamba behind the Mac at Freckled Mamba, and Kevo behind the Mac as well at Kevo Post. That's right. We're doing a StreamYard producer and an in-studio producer. That's how big of a deal Collin Gillespie is. You can follow Steven at StevenPG3. That is Steven with a PH. We can follow Gil at Gil McGregor _. You can follow me at ERIKRUBY. Everybody go celebrate like you just signed a $48 million extension, and we'll see you on Monday.